Let's see. This is kind of wonky code here.
Is there any way that you can like on the main when you're how like when we're gonna type up the labels, we can type it up directly on the view. Is there a way that you can add an image directly from there too? Or do you always have to do it through code?
Yeah, you got to do it through code. I mean, you kind of can, like if you click on this image view, I think, let's see where it says image here. You can pick a default image to start. So yes, but I don't know, I like doing it in code just because, well, here, yeah, actually here, I'm not actually even using them for anything. So in theory, yes. In theory, like if you click on the image part and I say, let's say I delete all these, right? And I click the first image and I click on this drop down that says image and I click the shepherd. So it'll kind of just show up there. For all intents and purposes, this works for this idea. Normally it doesn't work because if you have a list view, it should be populated from some data stream, not like from you doing this. But for this particular purpose, it works. I can even get rid of all that code. What was this your question?
Yeah. I was thinking
Yeah.
that would be like neater for this purpose because we're not going to be changing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, yes, and the interesting part is this. This is the interesting part. I created some dogs, and I want to be able to pass a dog from this view controller that exists in this view controller to the next view controller. That's the interesting part. The first like scene here, the way it's drawn, is not that interesting. I can do it through code. I could do it through like these default settings. Just want to make sure it's working. Okay, it works. So I simplified this a bunch, this view controller, so that it should be very straightforward. I got rid of everything other than we have 3 image views with default images, and I created 3 dogs, right, of dog type. Right? These are dog objects. I got rid of all the arrays and other things because we actually don't need them. And actually, I would like to create these objects outside my view controller so that other methods have access to them. So I'm going to create them as class properties. I'll make them appear. All this means is that these functions also have access to these dogs, right? Otherwise, if I put them in my view controller, in my viewDidLoad function, then only the viewDidLoad function has access to them. But I need these guys to have access to these dogs, so I'm going to create them up here in my property list. It's wonky, but it should do the trick for what we're trying to do right now. So we have images, we have dogs, and nothing else, right? viewDidLoad doesn't do anything. Button presses don't do anything yet. Now, first, I want to take care of one housekeeping task, and that's this view controller needs a code file, right? Notice when I click on it, like I get this weird like thing that's doesn't look like the other one. If I click on this one, I get a nice view controller file that I can write code in. If I click on this one, I get this like nothing. This is a good indicator that this view controller doesn't have a code file yet. So it's not enough just to drag out a view controller from this drop down here and say, oh, I have one. I also need a file to go along with it. So how do I do that? Well, very easy. I go to File, New. I create a new file. And I'm actually going to create a new CocoaTouch class, right? Because Swift file gives you an empty file. I actually want to create an object that inherits from UI view controller. Notice this prior file for this view controller has a file that inherits from UI view controller, right? This one is the same. So I want to make sure that I get this structure, right? While I could type it out and it would be just fine, I get a nice wizard that lets me do that without having to do all the typing. So if I click on new, whoops, I'm sorry, file, new file, and I select CocoaTouch class and click next, it's going to ask me for the name of the file. So I'm going to say detail view controller, right? That's what I'm calling that view controller. I'm going to call it detail view controller. I'm selecting that name. It's totally arbitrary. You can call it whatever you want. And notice it has a little window that says subclass of, and it says UI view controller, which is what I want. So if I just leave that and click next, it's going to create me a nice, and then I click create. It's going to create me a nice view controller here called detail view controller. And I can pull that down here under the first view controller. It says detail view controller. And it tells me what? That it's a UI view controller subclass, right? And nothing in it. It has the view that loaded in it, and that's it. I could have very easily just typed this out by myself, but that's the way to do it through the wizard. Now notice, out of the box, I get this, a navigation mark. And this is going to be an important method that we need to implement in order to be able to travel between view controllers. So I'm just going to copy this code because I need it in the other view controller. I need it in my original view controller down here. I need my navigation. We'll get to this in a minute. Anyway, and this is now the intended file for the other view controller, except I need to connect the file to the view controller somehow. Right now, I just created a file. It's not connected to this second view controller as of yet, right? When I click it, again, I don't get the correct file here. So what do? Well, the only thing left to do is when I click on this, I need to go to the little passport at the top, and that's called the identity inspector. I have selected this view controller, right? And if I click the identity inspector, and it says custom class here at the very top, and I have to select which class this is. If I click a little drop down, I can find the class I created called second view controller, right? Somewhere here, somewhere here. UI. It's funny, I don't see it. Oh, it's detail view control, not second view controller, duh. I created something called detail view controller. Okay, so I click on this again, click the passport, and I look for detail view controller. Here it is. This is something I just created. That's why it's in the list. I need to click it. And now you see that this assistant editor updates with the correct file that is associated to my view controller. And this title updated. It says detail view controller. Now it used to say just view controller. Now it says detail view controller. Right? And voila, now this controller has a code file behind it, and I could do the same things to it as I did to the other one, which is connect two things to my new file. I'm going to call this main image view. And I'm going to connect this file, this label, call it breed label. Okay. Notice these are two completely different files. One is called detail view controller.swift, and the other one is called view controller.swift. Right. I'm gonna pause here and see if you guys have questions. No, okay. Next. I want to see if this view controller actually loads and does anything. So how do I do that? A couple of ways. Without actually connecting these two view controllers and having it like so that one takes me to the other, I can just make this one my primary, right? If I click on it, and I click on these little lines here, there's something called is initial view controller. If I click this checkbox, notice the arrow moved from here to here. So this is going to be the first one that loads. I want to make sure that this UI looks correct. I need some kind of background color for this so I can see it. I'll make it some kind of gray. And then I'm going to run my project. And my project now is not going to land on the first view controller. It's going to land on this detailed view controller by default because I changed that to be the initial one. And all I should see here is this container and the label. Perfect. So now I envision an interface where I go from one to the other, and then I want to be able to go from the other back to the first one. So I need one more kind of user interface element to help me do that. So that's going to be a button, let's say. I'm going to put a button up here that says back. Right. And this back button is going to need some code. So, well, first it's going to need some constraints. So it sits at the top left, and then I'm going to need some code. Let's say back button pressed. All right. Now, the only thing is, when I'm in the second view controller here, I need to display an image and a label or a breed, right? This is going to be my breed label. I need to display an image and a breed of something, right? And that something is going to have to be the dog that was selected from the previous screen. So I need a variable that holds that dog object, right? So I need to create a variable called selected dog of type dog. And that equals dog. Can I do that actually? I don't think I can do that. Yeah, I'm missing arguments. Let me think for a second. Yeah, I need to update my dog methods. It to have a default initializer. All right. Fine. So I need to create a dog object here. Select the dog, right? And then when this loads, I need to update image from dog object, update description from dog object. So I have a dog object here. It's empty, right? Like I initialized it with this empty stuff because my dog initializer now has this default stuff that does nothing but what? Oh, this is kind of annoying.
Maybe you can do UI image and just empty parentheses.
No, you can't do that. Yeah, you could probably do that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you could do that. I think you can do that. Okay, cool. So I have like this empty stuff here, right? Which doesn't do me any good. But nonetheless, we're going to start by saying, well, the image should be selected. Sorry, main image view dot image equals selected dog dot main image. And then the breed label dot text should be selected dog dot breed. Does that make sense? So I have a dog type object here. It has nothing in it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to update this dog object with something from the other view controller when I press buttons. Somehow I'm going to pass data to it. I'm going to change what this dog thing is. So it's probably actually a better way to do this.
Can you do it in the other view controller, like when you press the button in that code, or would it be private? Yeah, right.
Sorry. I think that's better. Okay, fine. You know, I'm gonna try it the other way for now. But I think it's better to create, oops. Text equals. All right, I'm gonna go back to the question. What did you say? Something's private?
No, I was gonna say, can't you just like in the view controller, when they press the button, update like the dog, and then like create the selected dog there, but I don't know if you can make it like universal. That way in your detail view controller, all you have to do is just update.
Yeah, it's a great thought. It's not so easy to do, like just the way you're saying it, but that's exactly the way that the Swift programmers thought. They're like, why can't we just reach into this new view controller and update their object? And there's a way to do that. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So that's an excellent thought. You can't do it directly, but they've built a mechanism for you to be able to do it in this method here. So, but that's an excellent observation. The problem is that these two view controllers are not connected by any means right now. So one doesn't know about the other. So the fact that there's a dog variable here, the other view controller has no idea, right? Okay, let me see if this works first. Make sure that we didn't break anything. that it compiles. Okay, back button is not big enough. It's okay. I lost my something here. I lost this label. Why? Not sure. It's interesting and kind of annoying that that disappeared. Product, clean build folder. Okay. Oh, it didn't disappear. What am I talking about? It's there. It's just, it's updating the breed label text with the breed from the dog, which is empty right now, right? Duh. Okay. So we're good there. Fine. So this looks okay. So now I'm going to go back to this being my initial view controller, and we're going to connect these things somehow. So I'm going to go back to his initial view controller and run. Cool. All right. Here's a neat trick. If I click on a button, control click and drag from one button to a view controller, and I let go, I get another dialog box that says action segue, right? This is one way to add segues to your view controllers. Just like we control click and drag stuff to code files, we can control click and drag elements to other view controllers and create segues. The simplest segue is a show segue. These are all different segue types. I'm just going to use show, and then notice you now have like this segue, right, that's connected to this button. And when I press this button now, I should go back. I should go to this view controller. That's basically what it's telling me. So let's see if that works. So if I click it, and this is coming up from the bottom, but there's all sorts of different things you could do to make it not come up from the bottom. This is just a presentation trick. But now I'm stuck here because this back button doesn't do anything. Right? So yeah, I'm stuck. But notice I was able to go from one view controller to the other one, right? And forget the presentation from bottom up. The presentation could be different. I could create like a different, I could click on this segue. Notice I clicked on the actual arrow. That's the segue, this little thing, it turned blue. And I have stuff here that I could do to it. And I click custom. Show detail. present is pop over. Anyway, we can deal with those things later, but the important thing right now is I need to be able to come back to my original view controller. So how do I do that? I need to write some code in the back button, right? This back button pressed in my second or my detailed view controller. I need to write some code here to dismiss this view controller. Essentially what happens is a new view controller was overlaid on top of the old view controller. I need to dismiss it so the old view controller can show. And the code for that, I actually have to look up because I don't know it off the top of my head. So dismiss modal VC Swift. It's like a one line. That you can just copy and paste. You can look this up, copy and paste it. It says self.dismiss view controller animated. Disanimated? What? Pretty sure this was it. That's the problem. Okay. Oh, they updated the name of this method. Duh. Yeah, they do this like every year. They'll update what they call the methods, and you got to make sure that it's like the latest version of that method. Anyways, this is like some dismiss. Self is the view controller. Dismiss is like the method, and then these are two parameters that you pass. Then that happens, right? It works. It's kind of, the transitions are wonky, but it works. And that's what I'm looking for right now. Going from one to the other, one from the other. We'll look at different types of transitions later. But the point is I'm able to now get from there to there and from there to there. It doesn't look smooth, but it's happening. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing for the pit bull. I'm going to do the same thing for the mutt. Yeah, so I have 3 segues. 1, 2, 3. And I want to make sure that they all take me there. Shepherd goes there. Pitbull goes there. And the mutt goes there. Okay. Questions? I'm going to pause for a minute. We have 2 view controllers. I've connected all these buttons to different segues that take me to the second view controller. And I created a back button, and the code behind that back button just dismisses this view controller because it's shown as like on top of the old one, right? The old one, the root view controller didn't disappear. It's still there. It's in the memory. This is like being stacked on top and then just removed from the stack. The old one comes back. And the function that does that is like this one line of code that says self.dismiss. Okay, but it's not doing anything useful, right? Like I'm pushing the shepherd and I get a blank, and I'm pushing the pit bull and I get a blank, and I'm pushing the mutt and I get a blank. So I have to update this variable, right? And I have to send them the dog that was selected. Right now I have an empty dog object here, right? My selected dog object, which is populating the image and the breed, is empty. So I'm getting nothing and nothing here. What I want to do is I want to pass one of the objects, the one that was selected, to this view controller. And I have to do it here in this. I'm going to delete it from this view controller so you don't get confused. It needs to actually exist in the initial view controller. This view controller has a function that I pasted down here, and it's called, when I uncomment it, it's called prepare for segue, right? See this? So this function, what it does is it does something right before the segue transition happens. And this function actually can create objects of the target view controller. So we can actually create an object of this target view controller in here in the original view controller, and then we'll have access to its selected dog property, and we can change it, right? So the only thing I need to do here is say for dog equals or current dog or something. I'm going to create a blank dog, and then I'm going to update this dog based on what I pressed, right? So I'm going to say shepherd pressed. I'm going to say current dog equals shepherd. Current dog equals pit bull. Current dog equals what? So depending on what button I press here, I'm changing this value. So my view controller knows what I pressed, right? And if my view controller knows what I pressed, then I'm going to take that and I'm going to send it to the next view controller in this function here. And it even gives you like notes on what you should be doing. One, get the new view controller using segue.destination, and then two, pass the selected object to the new view controller. Cool. How do we do that? So this is segue.destination method. I need to look up the exact syntax. Yeah, this is pretty much it. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable called VC for view controller. And I'm going to assign it something called segue.destination, and I'm going to cast it as detail view controller. And I don't know why. Okay. So this is an important line of code. Delete these comments so you don't really get super confused. Okay. So I'm creating a variable called VC. Now this variable is basically this view controller or a version of this view controller because of I cast it as detail view controller, right? I'm saying, hey, create a variable, look for the Segway's destination, right? And create a variable of that type, basically, right? So whatever this destination is going to be, that's the type that's going to create. That's the type of this variable, right? This is really important because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say VC dot selected dog, right? That's the object that's in here in this detail view controller. If I click into it, it has a variable called selected dog. So I'm actually manipulating this variable from the old view controller because I have kind of a handle on it, right? Back in the initial view controller, I have this variable called VC, and it's essentially a detail view controller. So I have access to its selected dog property, and I can make that this current dog, which I updated based on what number I pressed or based on what button I pressed. This makes sense. Now, presumably, when I go to the next view controller, the current dog or the selected dog will match what the current dog is. And the current dog is going to match whatever I assign to it based on what button I pressed. So effectively, I'm passing that object, the entire object, over to the next view controller using this prepare for Segway method. It's a little bit of a mind bender, but this is one of the most popular ways to send data from one view controller to another. Essentially create a variable, a view controller variable of type destination view controller, and now you have access to those properties in there. And you should have created a target property that you're going to be sending your data to. And you just set that target property to some value in the initial view controller here. Let's see if that works. It's not. Oh. Kind of works. Something went wrong. What? The mutt works. I'm kind of like one behind. Okay, so it kind of works. There's something wrong, which we'll have to figure out. But it kind of, does this method make sense to you guys before I figure out what's actually going on here? The fact that there's actual images here means that I'm passing data. It has to, right? These dogs only exist here, right? They only exist in the initial view controller, the first view controller. I created them here. This second view controller has no dog data, right? The fact that I'm able to land here and actually see dog data on the user interface means that I'm passing information from the other view controller to this somehow. And the way that's happening is this. I'm having some like synchronization issues. It's like it's catching the previous dog's data and sending it for some reason, but it is still sending data. And the mechanism is it's a two-prong thing, right? It says get new view controller using segue.destination. So I create a view controller and I use this kind of mechanism that says segue.destination. I cast it. This as is casting, right? Like you guys know what type casting is, meaning I'm going to force the type of this variable to be of this type. And this type isn't arbitrary. I picked it because my destination view controller is of this type, detail view controller. Whoops. Right. If I had called this view controller second view controller, then this would be second view controller, not detail view controller. So now I created a variable of type detail view controller, which means I have access to its properties. And one of its properties is selected dog, right? If I go into the detail view controller, one of its properties is selected dog, right? Which is instantiated to nothing, but I could change that from back here, right? I'm changing it here. I'm assigning it some value that I have up here. And this is where my problem lies. There's probably some synchronization issue that I'm failing to figure out this instant, but we'll figure it out. Each one of these buttons, when I press them, in theory, is setting this variable to a different dog. So in theory, once this variable is changed, I am changing this variable in the target view controller, and that should be displaying the correct data. And it's not, I'm one dog behind. All right, questions before I start trying to figure out why we're one dog behind.
Which was the line of code of when you press back when you're on the detail view controller?
Yeah, so if I go to detail view controller, I created this event handler called back button pressed, and this is the line of code that dismisses the current view controller. It's on a stack.
How does it know to go back to the view controller?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the new view controller sits on top of the old view controller. So if you dismiss the new view controller, the old view controller is still there, right? Think about a stack data structure. When you pile things on top of the stack, when you remove things from the top, the things below are still there, right? So you don't have to do anything other than dismiss. There's other ways, like to go to specific view controls if you want to, but here we don't need to. I can write different code that tells me, that says go to view controller named whatever. But in this case, I don't have to. I can just simply get rid of the new view controller, and the old one's still below it.
Are you gonna upload this today on Blackboard?
This example, yeah, I could. I want to figure out what's wrong first before I upload it. I'm missing something. So for the next like 20 minutes, I want to talk about table views. And then next week, we're going to talk about both of these ideas again. I'm going to go over this multi-view idea and table views just because they kind of go hand in hand. And I'll figure out what's going on here with this synchronization problem.
Professor, do we have any lab due next week?
No. Lab 6A will be due the week before the final, and lab 6B will be due the day of the final. All right. So if there's not any questions, I mean, there's a lot going on here. I'll let you guys digest. And as if though it wasn't enough, I want to introduce another topic very superficially, because it's probably one of the most used user interface elements in iOS programming, and that's table views. Right? A table view exists probably in, I would say, unless it's a game, probably exists in every single app out there. If not one, multiple table views. Think about your mail app, your contacts app. Think about Twitter. Think about any social media app. Any of them. All of them use table views. Those list things that you scroll through that have stuff like line items in them, that's a table view. And no matter what it looks like, it's still a table view. A table view essentially is like a one column table in iOS. So there's only one column and there's a bunch of rows, and each one of those rows has content in it, right? And each row doesn't have to be identical to the next one, and there's sections and other things. But if you think of any app that you have on your phone, almost, like I said, other than games, you can think of either the entire app as a list view / table view, or several components of it utilize table views. So it's really important to talk about them. And table views are not straightforward. So that's why I normally dedicate like 2 or even 3 classes to table views. Not understanding multi-view applications is also a problem when dealing with table views, because normally when you have a list of stuff and you want to click on one of the list items, you need to go somewhere else, right? So if you don't know how to do that, like this particular mechanism, if you don't understand this mechanism down here, and it's really a 2-line mechanism. All the other stuff I did, it's all fluff. This is really what's important. One is to understand that there's something called prepare for segue. If you're using segues to go from one view control to the other, and that inside of that method, you can actually get a handle of your destination view controller, and you can manipulate its properties with data from this view controller. If you understand these 2 lines of code, then you understand one of the more popular mechanisms to pass data between view controllers.
Professor, if we, let's say, have another view controller that we want to go to, should we have a segue in that too?
Yeah, you can have many segues. Let me see if I probably have some. Let me show you an example of some things here. Probably have labs that I could show you with several segues and what that kind of looks like.
And each segue is going to take us to the very next view controller, right?
To the one it's connected to. Here's a project that I'm helping some grad students with. Let's take a quick look at what this looks like. Here's one of the modules for this project. There's other modules, but notice each one of these is connected with segues to other view controllers, right? And there's logic behind all of those, and there's all these like app files here that talk about access, talk about custom elements and other things. There's a networking utility, but this is like the login module for some application, right? That allows you to log in and do some things. Notice there's segues all over the place, and I'm moving between view controllers back and forth. There's a tab navigation controller here with like tab items on the bottom, so you can click between them. And then each one of those tabs takes you to different view controllers. See, the home takes you to this one, the nearby takes you to this one, the feedback takes you to this one. So this tab view controller down here allows you to click the bottom tabs and go to these different view controllers. And then this one takes you to yet another one, right? This is like a list view. It takes you to another like detail view type of thing. So this is typical what like apps look like if you use Storyboard to make them with connections and view controllers and segues, right? So yeah, just an example to kind of give you an idea of what you can and should be thinking about when you're building apps. Back to this one. Let's see. Oh, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you table views. So, and this is going to have to be quick, but just so you get an idea of what we're looking at is I'm going to create a new project. And I'm going to call it table example. All right, here's a brand new project. And if I go to the main area here, I don't want to mess around with this plain view controller, right? This is a normal view controller that has normal, it inherits from normal UI view controller. What I really want is a table view controller, right? And by the way, I can just delete this. And it's code file. I don't need it. Right. If I want to land on a table view controller from the very beginning, you know, this is where I want to start. So the other thing that comes out of the box for me, I don't actually need it. I do need to specify that this is my initial view controller. And where is that button? Is initial view controller. So I have this little arrow. The problem right now I face is that I don't have a code file for this table view controller. So I just make one. File, new file. I'm going to use CocoaTouch class because I want to inherit from UI table view controller. So I click next. So this is going to be my first table view controller. Right? This is something I picked out of a hat. I don't want to inherit from UI view controller. I want to inherit from UI table view controller. That makes a big difference. And you'll see in a minute why. My first table view controller. Okay, it inherits from UI table view controller, very important. Click next. And create. Okay, so notice my first table view controller code file was created. And if I click on main, and I click on this, I can connect them. Go to the identity inspector, and under class, I can select my first table view controller. Now this is connected to that code file I just created. If I click the assistant, I'll actually see them side by side, right? Notice my table view controller file is a lot different than the regular UI view controller file. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. It's all commented out, but it's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. First, super dot view did load, right? I have my view did load function here. And then next, I got all this stuff here. Now, in order for a table to work, I'm going to try and run this, and you'll see it will work because this says 0 and this says 0. But in order for a table view controller to work, it needs to know some information. If it doesn't know this information, it's not going to work. iPod 7 Touch. That's so weird. I didn't mention. Let me do this again. So while that's loading, we have to get a couple of things right here before this will work. So a table view has, okay, this has nothing in it. It runs only because this is hard coded, right? So anyway, I need to answer some questions before my table would actually work. And those questions are, there's 3 of them actually. Number 1 is, how many sections am I going to have, right? A table needs to know how many sections it has. Think about your contacts app on your iPhone, right? It has several sections, like each letter is a different section, and it's actually denoted, right, by like a little gray thing that tells you the letter. If I find my contacts app, I'll be able to show you guys. Yeah, like, yeah, you can't see it, it's too bright. But right, like when you go to your contacts, there's like the A's and the B's and the C's, and then the A is like this gray bar, and it shows you all the A's, and then there's a little gray bar that says B, and then it shows you all the B's, right? Those are called sections. That's a table view, and those are the sections of that table view. So I need to know how many sections I'm going to have. Without telling my table view how many sections I'm going to have, it's not going to run. It's going to be like, you got to tell me how many sections this table is going to have, otherwise I'm not going to run. And where you specify that is in this method here that says number of sections in table view. So here it's hard coded, it says 0, I could say 1. The next thing that it tells, that I need to tell my table, is how many rows they're going to be, right? I need to know that ahead of time. And if I don't, it's not going to work. If I don't have anything, if this doesn't return any valid integer, then I'm not going to be able to run my table view. So I need to give it a number, 10. And then really for anything useful to happen, you need this method to also be implemented. And it's called table view self a row at index path, right? What this means is each one of these, notice in here, there's something called prototype cell. Essentially, the table view has these rows, and each one of those rows has some stuff in it. So this is where you configure what's in those rows, right? Or in each one of the cells. You need to create a cell, and then you need to return that cell so that could be displayed here. Without content, you don't have a table, really. While the table view will work without content, it won't do anything useful. So these are the three things that are an absolute must in order for you to have some kind of functioning table view. You need to say how many sections there are going to be, and this method is the one that determines that. You need to say how many rows there are going to be, and this method is the one that determines that. And then you need to say, well, what is each row going to show, right? You need to create a cell. You need to add some stuff to the cell. See, it says here configure cell. And then you need to return that cell, and that's the cell that's going to be displayed here. And you're going to get as many cells as you have rows, right? Each row is a cell. So if it's 10, I'm going to get 10 rows here. Right? So let's see if that works. Right now, I created a cell and I'm returning a cell, but there's nothing in it. However, I still should get like 10 rows when this eventually does load. And it's not liking something. Nib, identifier, connect the prototype cell, blah, 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 blah. Okay. More problems. One thing I forgot to mention is that if you go to, there's like this thing here that says reuse identifier. So I need to actually specify this cell. I have to click on it to go to its identity inspector. Or here, yeah, I have to specify a reuse identifier here. So I can change this to my cell. I need to copy that into the reuse identifier for the actual cell, and hopefully that works. This prototype cell here did not know like what reuse identifier to use. You have to specify. So I'm specifying it in code, but I'm not specifying it for the actual cell, and I think that's why it was crashing. Let me just say, I hope that's why it was crashing. And that's not why. That's weird. Root. Must register a nib or a class for the identifier or connect the prototype cell and storyboard. DQ a cell with identifier myself. Why not? Here's my error. I'm not sure why it's telling me it's not able to do it, but that's all you really need to do. Is do that, and then okay, well, let's select basic style or subtitle style. Since it doesn't have custom. Yeah, okay. So I had to change the style of the cell. I didn't specify if it's custom, you have to specify like what cell you're using. So I'm using a default style for cell. And notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, exactly 10 of these rows, right? And that's because of this number. It created it 10 times and it rendered it 10 times. And each one of these, as you can see, I could click on them and it scrolls, right? Just like a table view, just like you would expect it to scroll. If I made this 30, you would see it scroll past the screen. Yeah, so now I have a table view with 30 cells and each one of them has nothing. There's title, subtitle because of the type that I selected. I can configure the cell here. We'll show you a couple of basic things before we call it a night, but cell dot label, is it label? Text label. Right, so this first one is text label and the second one is detailed text label. Cell dot label, cell dot text label. Dot text equals hello. And cell dot detail text label equals I don't know, Adele fans, it's me. Let me see what happens when we run that. Whoops, this is text label dot text. What? One more time. So I effectively was able to change each one of these cells text label and detail text label to something that I provided, right? Now, this is kind of stupid to do it to all of them. It's not, doesn't really make any sense. But you can imagine this would be a lot more useful if this stuff varied, right? It was different. If every one of these lines was some kind of different text, and when I click it, I go to another view control that has some details and other things, right? So while I'm hard coding some data, next week we'll see how, first we'll see how this actually works, and we'll do a proper kind of introduction into table views. But more importantly, we'll see how this method actually acts as a loop and generates all these cells, and how we can take variable data and populate variable data into those cells so you can have a more interesting app. Okay, we're 2 minutes over, so hopefully this wasn't too confusing. We're certainly going to start from scratch next week. But this is what ultimately we're trying to get to, is how do we create cells and table views, and how do we work with them? It's not simple, as you can see, but it's also not terribly complicated. We're going to be looking at these 3 methods. And normally we're not going to be returning static numbers. These are going to be some kind of variables, because you can't really know ahead of time how many rows you're going to need, right? You need to look at some data, like some array, and be like, how big is this array? Make that many rows, that kind of thing. All right, before we break, does anybody have any questions?
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
For the attendance, did you get time to fix the attendance for the day when we had the test?
I did not, but I will. And I assure you that attendance will not really affect your grade.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, did you grade lab 3?
I didn't. I'll
Okay.
try and have it graded for next time. So labs 3 and 5, I have not graded. Everything else should be graded. All right. Well, have a good night, and we'll pick up multi-view apps and table views next week.
Good night, Professor.
Good night. I'll stick around for 5 minutes if anybody wants to chat.
Professor,
Yes, sir.
so I wanted to chat about the final exam. So like next week, by next week I will give you the 6th lab, right? You say you will post it today?
Yeah, I'm not gonna have time tonight, but I'll try and post it tomorrow.
I mean, as long as like you post it like 2-3 days, like apart from today,
Yes.
like I will, by next week I will give it to you, the 6th lab. And for the final exam, I will be here for the next class, so like we can discuss then if you would like.
Okay. Sure.
I'm leaving on like 10th, December 10th. So next class I think it's yeah, it is 6, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
We'll pick a day.
All right. Cool.
Let's talk at the end of next class, and we'll set a date.
All right. Cool. All right. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, Professor. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.